So rewind 10 seconds. Let's start with a bunch of introductions. If you don't know me already, Leanne and I are the co-coordinators for the Goldwater Scholar community this year. I will be the host this evening for Research is Hard and Why You're Doing Great. And if the panelists are ready, why don't we start with maybe we can talk about who you are, where you're at, what year of scholar you were, and anything else you want to add?
Sure, yeah, I can take things away since we're already unmuted. So the reason that Teddy and I are actually sitting together is that we work in the same department at the same university in the same building. And so we decided to call, yes, in the same class. And so we decided to call in together. I am a PhD student in my second year at MIT. I'm studying electrical engineering, and I do research specifically in what's called integrated photonics. So essentially doing computer chip design where the chips work using light instead of electricity. I got the Goldwater in 2020, and yeah, I think that's everything.
Sounds good to me. Justice, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Justice Robinson. I won the Goldwater in 2020. I am a senior at the University of North Carolina and at Chapel Hill. I study neuroscience. My current research involves mapping the mu-opioid receptor within the norepinephrine system in mice brain. So yeah, I'm like as Teddy likes to call the resident old person, I guess. I didn't start college until I was 24. So I'm currently 29. So I'll be answering those type of questions, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, and she's also the chair of our mentorship committee. So if you have any mentorship questions, she's your gal. Yeah. Kayla?
Yeah, hi.
I feel like a third grade teacher calling on people.
Hi everyone, I'm Kayla. So I'm technically a senior credit-wise, but I'm not graduating undergrad until next spring. So I guess my first senior year at Central State University. It's in Ohio. It's an HBCU in Ohio. Research. Okay, so I do a lot of different things, but basically I study planetary science and astrobiology. I've kind of just been thrown into that, and I do a lot of things with computer modeling. So photochemical models of the Martian atmosphere, look at sulfur isotope abundances, sulfur isotope fractionation, the emergence of life, how life thrives, what makes the planet Earth-like. Those are like my current projects that I'm really interested in right now. I won the Goldwater last year, 2022. And I guess I'll be talking about mostly I'm the first one to win the Goldwater at my school ever. So I think that brings its whole research is hard aspect to it. When me and Teddy were playing this event, we got into a lot of those different conversations and just, being a Goldwater scholar, but also being a person too. So yeah, I'm excited to meet everyone.
Ellen, would you like to go?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. I don't know if I'm the oldest Goldwater alum here in terms of like year of scholarship, 2019, but I'm currently a third year PhD student in biostatistics at the Harvard School of Public Health, and my research area is kind of at the intersection of environmental science, public health, and then data science. So yeah, happy to talk about a wide variety of topics, and I'm kind of in the transition right now from being primarily a student taking courses into like full-time dissertation work. So that transition comes with its own associated, internal doubts, etc.
And last but definitely not least, Yasmeen.
Hey everyone, I'm Yasmeen. I am a 2021 Goldwater Scholar and one of the co-chairs for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And so I work with many of these wonderful speakers and in terms of that. So another plug for that application for Friday, the 2023 Council. I am a recent graduate of the University of Michigan. I graduated in December with a bachelor's in biomolecular science, which is basically biochemistry. And my research is in heavy chain only antibody fragments or nanobodies in the context of neurodegeneration and a bit of proteostasis. And as I'm kind of shifting into becoming an incoming MD PhD, I'm looking a little bit more into a little bit of cancer bio and specifically pediatric leukemia. So.
Cool. Yeah, thank you to all our panelists talk a little bit about themselves and their very, very interesting research. As you may have noticed from what Leah was saying and also all the introductions, Goldwater Scholars tend to do a lot of research. And I actually have a story time. So how we came up with this event, in case you're wondering why we wanted to host this in the first place. In one of the planning meetings for the new scholar cycles, I was supposed to lead one, but about 10 minutes before I needed to start the event, I spilled a neurotoxin all over my web bench. And I was 20 minutes late to a meeting that I was supposed to lead. And I was looking at the list of events we had, and I was just like, something's missing here. Like, clearly, there's more to being a Goldwater Scholar than just being, mentorship or doing conferences and so forth. And honestly, the truth is research is very hard. And many of us, even Goldwater Scholars, feel like the vulnerabilities that we're feeling are not, maybe not justified, or maybe just very isolated from other people. And I want to set the right tone for everyone who's coming into our community, that that's not the case. So I've invited these, Kayla and I invited these 5 very awesome panelists to maybe normalize these conversations about instances of their vulnerability, but also adaptability through these, whether it's a hostile environment or a really difficult situations that they find themselves in. So,
so the electrodes that are placed, they use the right arm, the left arm, and then the left leg. The left leg.
Very interesting. Thank you. I too am interested in electrodes. That's actually part of my research. But okay, going along those veins, I think it might be good to start just go around the table with everyone who wants to share something that they found or they're still going through that is kind of difficult for them and they're willing to talk to everyone about. So no need to popcorn or anything, just talk whenever you want.
I can start off. So for just quickly, since I forgot to mention any of this earlier, I also graduated from the University of Michigan in undergrad, and I did my undergrad degree in physics. So switching into grad school, I'm now studying electrical engineering. And so kind of along the way with that transition, that gets into kind of one of these challenges that, I can focus on specifically, which is my research has switched all over the place. I started in particle physics for a few years, did a little bit of cybersecurity, did a little bit of epidemiology, and now I'm in integrated photonics. And so, it's been a long journey, a very, very much a zigzag path to where I am now, and very much a journey of figuring out what I enjoy and really kind of finding my place in research, and research that is not only exciting to do on a daily basis, but that I'm excited about the long-term outcomes. And so while I'm super excited about the work that I get to do now, especially switching into grad school and making that field transition, it was not the smoothest ride the entire time. So I've been lucky in a few different ways where I have a wonderful advisor and a wonderful research group who have helped introduce me to my new field and helped kind of give me the stepping stones to find my way. But especially taking classes and getting started in my new field as a grad student, starting engineering classes at the graduate level right away without ever taking any as an undergrad was very much a challenge. And so our department specifically actually has a class requirement for you to get your PhD. And as far as requirements go, it's not too strict, but you have to take 4 classes and you have to get a minimum of 3 A's. Doesn't sound so challenging, but let me tell you, it can be. And so I ended up, for example, I ended up having to take 5 classes, which again, doesn't sound that serious, but in the moment, finding out that I was going to need to take extra classes, more than average, having to put in extra work and feeling like I really failed that first time through was really challenging to deal with. And so that's an area where, again, I was really lucky to have a really strong support system. Teddy and I actually worked through a group project in my 5th class I ended up taking, and we ended up kind of like getting through the finish line together. But that was an area where that was definitely a big challenge, is kind of making this transition. Very much kind of a hill to get over, but one that I'm glad is in the past now.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Sabrina. I think like listening to a bunch of grad students talk about their experience now, like I think as an undergrad, I feel a lot of undergrads on this call can speak to this. Applying to grad school is very daunting. It's just scary overall. And so I think for me, looking into grad school, it's really refreshing to hear you say that, because again, like in the back of my mind, I had this perception that I had to be perfect or have this perfectionism mindset post winning the Goldwater. And since I am the first one to win at my school, I think that put added pressure on me, because they're like, okay, Kayla did this, so like, what's she gonna do next? And I'm like, Kayla's tired, or Kayla feels drained, or Kayla feels like I need to go home. Like there's something I just did not want to talk about my research anymore, because I had talked about it so much to so many different people. And I know that we all went through that, like us, like, you know, writing our little, they're writing our little, like, I guess, like stories about us winning the Goldwater. I feel like everyone has that story. We were talking about that, Teddy. Yeah. So like, everyone has that story. And I feel like the amount of people that approached me to talk about it, I love to talk about it, but it's also like, I started to associate myself with my research over time. So I think winning the Goldwater in March to I guess like the beginning of summer, it was literally just me like Goldwater, research, like just like for like 2 months straight. And I literally started to associate myself with my research, which I really loved, but I also found to be very toxic later on. So again, it's really refreshing to hear you say that you've done stuff all over the spectrum, because you got to dip your toes into a lot of different fields. You got to experience who Sabrina was in a lot of different fields to find where you fit. And I think I'm majoring in environmental engineering, but I'm doing like planetary science research. They're like night and day sometimes. And so I know where I want to go, but I also want to embrace where I am. But the Goldwater will definitely make you think 10 spaces ahead, because you're like, I did this, now I want to like actually get my PhD, but you're like, I have like 2 or 3 more years of undergrad left. Like that's not here yet, but you want it to be here. And so I think overall, just taking it a day at a time and knowing that you earned that, you did that, but that does not define who you are as a person. That's just a subset of your life. And so, yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents and kind of what I'm going through now, to be honest. Like it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, I'm very glad you brought up that idea of, I think I might venture to guess a lot of Goldwater scholars, whether it's starting in college or even earlier, you might have accidentally built your identity around your academic achievements, around whether it's research or even classes or extracurriculars. And it's very easy to get lost in that mode that you built for yourself. Very easy to feel like, oh, if I can't even do the thing that I'm supposed to do right, then what am I?
Right.
And that is one of the things I feel like we should address on. And I want to bring in this concept that I've actually heard from student athletes. From my friends who are sprinters and like long distance runners, they work just as hard, if not harder than we are in their fields. And one thing that I heard from them was, you have to first look at yourself not as an athlete, but a person who does sports. We are first and foremost people who just happen to do research. People who may be good at it, may not be good at it, but at the end of the day, you're a person first. Sorry, just want to run off on the tangent. So thank you, Kayla, for bringing that up.
I guess I will go next. So my story has been really weird. Like I said, I started at 24. I was a life insurance agent for a good part of my adult life before going back to college. And I wanted to study depression because I was very high achieving in high school, and not being able to go to college right after caused severe depression for the same reason that you talked about. My identity was very wrapped up in maintaining a really high GPA, being seen as a really smart person. I've always been very low income. So when I could not afford college, it was crushing. But I was also very interested because I think this way, like, oh, how did my personality change? Which is why I study brains now. And I kind of just held on to that dream and went to community college. Definitely understand the feeling of being the first. Kayla, I graduated from a community college, and that's where I won the Goldwater at Tulsa Community College before transferring. And that in itself was just very weird. I had already counted myself out. A lot of all of us now go to universities really big with labs and things. I didn't think anybody from a community college would be able to compete. I just needed money to transfer. So I didn't realize that the research opportunities that I'd taken advantage of would afford me these opportunities. It's part of the reason why I'm really big on mentorship. When I am mentoring, I like to be very open and honest with all of my mentees because things can get really terrible. I went in 2020 and I transferred over to UNC. So I came halfway across the country in a state where I didn't know anyone in the middle of a pandemic, which is very lonely and very terrible. And I'm riding that big wave of having been like interviewed on television, and I'm on billboards in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I got here and realized, like, one, like I'm a human being, and two, man, I'm not really good at putting brain tissue on slides. Like, it just was terrible. I was so sad, and I gave myself so much like grief. It felt like, and then the worse I felt about myself, the worse things got, because it's just like I was breaking things. I was pretty sure that the grad student I worked under thought I was an idiot. I was good at like handling the ferrets, so like that was good. You know, I was good with animals, but I just felt like I could do nothing wrong. And what really helped was being honest about it. I would speak with the PI directly and say, hey, I don't think I'm good at this. I think I suck. I think I am way too far in my head here and over my league. Like, I'm pretty sure they chose the wrong person for the Goldwater. So I was like, I should give it back. But being able to talk about it, being able to talk very openly with him about how terrified I was of being a failure. It's kind of gone now because it doesn't go back that far, but I even opened up to older Goldwater scholars in the Slack channels, and I just asked, like, on the general, hey, has anybody ever had like an experience where they feel like they are not doing anything in the lab right? And the responses were overwhelming. Everybody had a story about messing up something, a lot of somethings. It was really funny. Even like it finally made me laugh because I was like, oh my gosh, I've given myself this much hype, and for what? Like, I am still a human being. So it's definitely something that I think is really important. So I think this type of conversation that we're having, especially with new scholars, are very, very important because it's very easy to get wrapped around that. And I mean, like, you won already, like, you're cool, yeah, but like, you're still human, you're still human, and you're gonna mess up. So it's all right to really accept that and to be open and honest about it.
Well, I'm loving hearing all the stories from different disciplines so far. I cannot relate to doing in-person, like, physical labs, because I think the last like beaker that I touched was my freshman year of college in 2016 in chemistry lab. But I have been doing research since 2017. And I can confirm that even after that many years, I'm still like having moments or even weeks, months of uncertainty. So unfortunately, if you stay in research, this is not something that necessarily goes away. It just changes form or like, hits you when you jump into a slightly new field or different project. So when the organizers sent me kind of the list of questions, potential topics, the two kind of research snafus that came to mind or ongoing issues, one was a project that actually had a pretty good idea of what I was doing. I had set up like these interesting simulations. I ran the simulations. I had like typed up my manuscript. And then I realized that there was an issue like in the way I had saved the simulations where like it was just saving the same like seed over and over again instead of like all the different simulations. It really just felt like facepalm. How could I have done this? I have to rewrite like my results. Thankfully, my advisors both told me, oh yeah, that's happened to all of us. Like, just don't even worry about it. So totally agree with Justice that talking with other people who you really respect is like such a great way of kind of like thinking, okay, everyone does this at some point. And then the more recent experience that I can relate is, I feel like, okay, I have a good idea of what I'm doing in my lab. But the most recent project that I've been working on since almost last summer is in kind of a new field for me, reinforcement learning. I didn't really know much like a year ago. And I've just had this ongoing like uncertainty of, is this going to work for my data set, my application? Like, is it not working because I don't know what I'm doing? Or is it not working because like, this is actually a really difficult problem and like the data set might not be well suited to the methods? Like, is it, is it interesting discovery or is it something that I'm doing? And I feel like that's something that you kind of encounter more and more when you're kind of pushing the bounds of like where the methods or the research is, right? It's like, no one has done this before. So I don't know if it's something that I'm messing up or just like, it is really hard. And that the uncertainty of like, will this or won't this work over your head for like months on end is like a very real fear, I guess, that in a way, I think kind of reflects the larger uncertainty of being in school, like especially grad school for, 5+ years, depending on kind of what field you're in. So I guess just going into all of this with the mindset of there are going to be potentially long periods of uncertainty and it might not be your fault. And in fact, often it's not your fault if you're like trying hard and talking with people and like honestly giving it your best effort. But yeah, so I don't know if those couple of stories resonate with others, but those were the things that came to mind.
I've ran too many simulations where after 24 hours of runtime, I realized I literally did not change any parameters from the last one. Yes, it did resonate.
Yeah, I just presented a set of conclusions. Like I got all the way to the point of presenting a set of simulations where I tracked the wrong variable and my advisor handled it so well. Like I knew what we were trying to do, but for some reason my brain just like hit go and got all the way through the end. And my advisor, she like, bless her heart, she handled it so well. She just went like, oh, that's not like really the variable we care about here. Actually we want to focus on, and we kind of talked through it. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did I just do that? So very much resonates.
Yeah, I also really resonate with everything that has been said, especially Ellen, you mentioned like long periods of uncertainty. Going back to my kind of first research experience, it was at a community college and they didn't have very much access to a lot of resources, but the resources that they did have access to kind of allowed me to spend quite a bit of time planning out the experiments, figuring out the proposal, figuring out the hypothesis. And of course, when kind of COVID hit and things got derailed, the project ended up essentially completely falling flat, where it was just, I had a proposal of what I would like to do, but this is a period of time where I just can't be in any kind of lab whatsoever. And then I, in a similar vein of Justice, was just kind of like looking for money so that I could go to a 4-year institution, and I stumbled upon the Goldwater. And I think that if I understood the magnitude of what the Goldwater is, I might have not even applied. And so I'm kind of glad that I just, went through the mentality of you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I went forward with the majority of the research being that proposal, and also some other stuff that I did with affiliated universities here and there. But I had some really strong references. I had a really strong track record, and I just decided to apply. And the aftermath of some of that stuff, it can be really easy to feel that you want to tie your identity to being a researcher because that's what you're being recognized for. I've been told that, you know, the higher that you rise, the larger the fall, and that's not the case, right? There can be this mentality or mindset that that's what it's going to be, but it's okay to make mistakes. As you've seen here, and every step of the way, mistakes are being made. And it's just trying to learn from them, trying to better understand who it is that you are. Maybe the personality changes that come about from this, as Justice also mentioned, the things that she's studying. And just kind of taking it as it comes. It's okay to, you know, just not know what's going on. And another kind of example of that kind of is with the pandemic and everything, with organic chemistry classes not being in person, not having really solid lab exposure, and then going on and doing a medicinal chemistry internship in this big pharma company, and them telling you at the end that they were afraid that you were going to light the lab on fire. So that didn't happen. It went really well, but they just kind of wanted to tell me that, like, we were taking a risk with you, but you know, the payoff can be worth some of that risk. So it's okay to take a sort of that leap of faith in a sense, and just kind of try it out and see what comes along.
Yeah, I sort of wanted to tack onto the COVID comment, but before I do that, I just want to, since we're trying to have an open conversation with all this stuff, if anyone in the audience wants to jump in, feel free to do so. I'll give you some time to think about it though, because it's a little nerve-wracking. But I wanted to tack on to what Yasmeen was saying with, I think especially, so if this year's scholars, you guys had COVID happen either senior year of your high school or freshman year of college, right? Depending on when you went. Both?
For me, at least. Like,
right.
Senior year is when it started, freshman year, we didn't have any like interactions, like no clubs really, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think for every year, the dynamic of how COVID affected you as a person and throughout your academic journey is slightly different. For me, it was kind of like what Yasmeen was touching on, which is I started in the lab, I started doing research that was hands-on, and then they're like, boom, no undergrads are allowed in the lab. So I was literally trying to build a vacuum chamber that I suddenly can't even touch anymore. And they're like, okay, do you know what how nonlinear optics works? I was like, I don't know how linear optics works, but they're like, okay, go do simulations on nonlinear optics. But I want to say that I just read the textbook and took off and really understood what I was doing. I have no clue. I still don't know how nonlinear optics works, to be honest. I know how to work the equations and simulations, but the physics is still a little beyond me. But the experiences I got jumping into that new field actually end up being fairly useful in terms of how it influenced what research directions I want to do in grad school. So there's an element of chance that was introduced in my academic journey. And I feel like a lot of scholars, not all of us, recognize that, you know, there's this randomness in our life. Randomness, like we feel like our successes is up to good luck and our failures is up to our own failings. When in reality, there's too many variables outside of our controls. Hey, maybe it was good luck, but you place yourself in the position to exploit that opportunity. Maybe it wasn't bad luck and you screwed up, but who knows if your screw up maybe it wouldn't have mattered if you had slightly better luck, right? So I think it's important to deconvolve a little bit with what is outside of your control and what you identify as success, failure, your own identity, and so on and so forth. Okay, if anyone wanted to talk about their experiences, now is also your time. Oh, Daniel, put something in the chat. Do you want to speak up?
I mean, this is more just relating to the whole madness that the COVID pandemic was for everyone, for those who had their research interrupted in the middle of it. And this is especially relevant for some of the panelists who say maybe graduated university during this pandemic. And then for a lot of the others that might be in the same graduation year as I am, 2024, 2023, then like that, the whole start of the university experience got just terribly corrupted by that. And especially if we were really looking to go to university for the express purpose of doing undergrad research, and then having that suddenly dashed by something that was supremely out of our control, it was immensely disheartening for me. I'd imagine that it was immensely disheartening for a lot of other people as well. But it does look like that, especially with us having stuck around, with us having gotten this far, that this. I'm trying to find the right way to phrase this. It is, I guess, maybe an unwavering resolve to try and make the best, and more than just make the best of the situation, but to literally fight the will of the heavens to continue our research and keep moving forward with our research careers, I guess is a good way to put the final lesson of this.
Okay, Daniel, number one, poetic. Okay, can we just take a moment? Okay. Two, yes, like literally, yeah. So I think COVID, for a lot of people, I don't think we were prepared to go through the physical, mental, emotional, like transformation that we all went through. And it looked different for every single person. That just everyone just looked different. I think for me personally, I think this contributed to my identity crisis with academia and research is I just threw myself into school. So like whenever I could like make sure like I'm just gonna like make sure like school's okay. That's the only thing I can like really kind of hold my reins on a little bit right now. So I made sure I went to like all my online classes. I almost blew up my parents' basement doing a chemistry experience. So it's like, it was just a learning curve for everything, right? And my advisor emailed me. He's like, hey, Caltech is looking for a student to do research. And I was like, okay, right, Teddy, exactly. I was like, okay, so why are you emailing me? And he's like, well, I was recommending you. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, I was like, that mindset of like, COVID literally made me doubt myself so much more than like I would have ever imagined. And I think when people see that you're able to work hard, as we all did through COVID, like, and we're still not in a steady state region, as Daniel said, we're still maneuvering through it in some ways. And I think persevering through that in a way that we did, we're still able to like accomplish big things, but also still be people. I think COVID showed me a lot of the bad in the world, just like, yeah, but it also showed me the good in myself, kind of, because I was able to push through that and still come out of it in a way that I could look back and like say, okay, I didn't completely fall apart in every single way, because trust me, Kayla did, but in some ways I was able to control it. And so I think COVID is so different for everyone, but I also think that really contributed to my academic crisis, because I just started to associate myself with school, because that's literally all I had. Like everything else, my parents were sick, my nieces and nephews were sick, family members passed away. Like it was just a lot going on that I could not control, as Teddy said. And I was like, school's the only thing I can kind of do, get up every day and do it. So I'm just going to make sure I do that so I can stay sane. I don't know if anybody else kind of threw themselves into whatever your school situation was, but that's literally all I had during COVID. Everything else was just like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to be able to buy toilet paper at the store anymore because everyone's just freaking out. Like, I don't know what's happening. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I can deeply relate to that as well. And this extends beyond COVID too, for any major crisis that I've personally experienced familial or say a massive competition is looming on the horizon for when I was back in high school, the knee-jerk response was to put my nose to the grindstone, which for better or for worse, because on one hand, it can deliver results. On the other hand, it's a little self-destructive. So it's a personal journey for me to sort of unlearn that habit and learn to be more than just a pure academic and find other social avenues and more creative outlets for the things that I'm feeling and the doubts that I'm expressing.
100%.
Yeah, Daniel brings up a good segueing to my kind of question about, a lot of us have talked about, separating our selves from our academic identity or just not putting all our worth into that. A lot of us have said that we do that, but I was wondering, just not just a question for the panel, but everyone, so how do you do that? Because for me, I've been starting to do that and talking personally with my therapist about it, and then just creating more of a work-life balance by consciously being is it going to be more productive if I go into the lab or do my work right now, or should I go bake some bread or something like that, or go for a walk and things like that. So a lot of us have talked about separating ourselves from our academic identity, but I just haven't heard a lot of people say what they do or how they kind of got there. If that makes any sense.
I think that's a great question, and something that I think was also just crossing my mind during this conversation is I think a lot of what going through the Goldwater application in particular forced many of us to do was to define kind of a narrative for our academic and career paths, right? At least I felt I think maybe Kayla was mentioning earlier, because you had spent so long honing that narrative in a way that it would be, clearly articulated to say reviewers, it's very easy to then have that kind of become the primary meaning in one's life during that. And I can say, I think even having experienced that far before the COVID-19 pandemic, I do think that's a common thing in the research academic space. And at least one kind of broad strategy that I've found in answer to your question, Thomas, is sometimes I recognize I don't necessarily have the self-control to say no to additional work. And so I basically kind of have other people in my life hold me accountable by reaching out to other people and saying, hey, let's get coffee, or let's go for a walk, or, we're going to have date night tonight, or, I'm going to call my parents for this hour and a half or whatever, and we're going to go for a walk. Just planning social things ahead of time and then not backing out of them is a great way to just force yourself to set down with the work, walk away, clear your head. And then it's also, lovely staying in touch with people. So that's honestly, I think my most effective strategy.
Yeah, you got to schedule it in. I feel you on that one.
I would definitely agree. One thing that I like to try to do is just kind of remember who I am to others. I'm a niece, I'm a daughter, a friend. And I like to do what I always try to convince my my mentees to do, which is to just stop, just go do something else. I am really a bit different because one, I'm older than everybody. I have a bull ring, I have tattoos. I'm already kind of punk rock scientist over here anyway. But I just decided that all the things that I loved are what were going to be my defining thing. And then I think also going through that really terrible time of it being taken away from me for a few years and then getting to come back to it. So I was kind of forced to find my own identity without it. And it's kind of crazy because you can only see part of my room in my apartment, but over there's a telescope. I've said nothing about astronomy, but it's interesting. There's a guitar. I'm pretty sure there's a sewing machine around here somewhere. I don't even know if I know how to use it. I'm just ridiculous. So just picking up a whole bunch of hobbies. That also helps. If it sounds cool, go do it. Put the computer down, put down the pipette, do something, anything else that maybe you just find cool. And I definitely agree with Ellen. Surround yourself with folks that want to go and have a good time. That definitely helps me.
I completely agree with Justice's addition to others. It can be really easy to get in your own head as to who you are. So actually going to the people who you care about and asking them how they see you, or the relationships that you have with different people, can really be a nice activity to have just one day, just to kind of learn and get another perspective of who you are as a person. You might completely see yourself as that researcher, but someone else might see you as a knitting buddy or whatever else it might be. And another thing to add in terms of narrative, there's always sort of building a narrative, and there's this need to build a narrative for some reason. It's easy to be surrounded by that, but I like to continually do things that don't necessarily fit that narrative, just to kind of bring myself out of that community, out of maybe like a steady feel, and a bit of I like to call it like a spiky personality, where it's not just one thing that you build into one experience, but you have multiple different experiences that you sort of build for yourself to turn into that kind of like spiky personality.
Yeah, kind of building off of all of these ideas of building out different parts of your personality, and kind of like Justice, you said, knowing when to put the pipette down, like go do something else. For me, something that I've struggled with is, sure, there are things that I'm interested in, right? But I'm also super interested in my research, and I do find it really fun. And there are some days when, sure, I could work after hours and I'm like happy as a clam and I'll keep chugging away. There are also days that are a lot more frustrating where, I can keep banging my head against the wall with a problem and I'm not going to get anywhere new. And, I really need to take a fresh look, but I just won't do it. And so, Thomas kind of briefly brought up the idea of talking through these things in therapy, which reminded me of a therapy technique that I've learned that's been super helpful, which is an adaptation of kind of a different like metaphor. But the way that my therapist talks about it is, how full is your bucket? And so basically throughout the day, you don't want to get dehydrated, right? You want a full supply of the thing that keeps you alive, which is water. So all day you can imagine that you're carrying around this bucket with you. And if it's full, you're doing great. You have a full supply of, again, the things that keep you alive and excited. And, maybe here or there, a friend needs help with something, and that might drain a little bit from your bucket, or you socialize a ton. And even though that's super exciting for you and it might be something that you're looking forward to, it drains a little bit. It's kind of like your social battery too. Or if things aren't going so hot with research, it drains a little bit. And so when I first started talking through this technique, I realized that I never actually sat and thought about where my bucket or where my batteries were. I was just chugging along constantly. And something that's been absolutely revolutionary, which sounds so simple, but when you actually start doing it, it can make a big difference, is just stopping in the middle of the day and thinking, where am I? Where is my bucket? Oh, it's empty. I need to go do a hobbies, some small bucket filler. It can be self-care. It can be a face mask. It can be going for a run. It can be reading. It can be playing video games. Any of these things that you're interested in, you can take that time to kind of build out these other parts of your life. And it doesn't have to be, every day being the same. Like for me, scheduling recreation doesn't always work out well. But if you just stop every once in a while and you think about yourself as a person and you think how am I feeling? You might be surprised by the answer. You might be surprised that you're feeling awesome and you can keep going with whatever you're doing, or you might need a break and you might not have even realized that you're reaching that point of burning out for the day or the week and you need a little recharging.
Definitely. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Teddy.
Oh, I think it's very interesting how broadly the responses in my mind has been, how do you wear different hats? One way, for example, is, you do different activities, or you help plan events for a GSC or all sort of stuff to help you dissociate or not be completely invested in just being a researcher. But back to your bucket idea, I also feel like I want to be completely honest in that it still might not be working out in the moment. Hint, hint, it's me. So I was realizing that as I was doing these late nights, doing these research for a long time, that a lot of the time I was sustained by anger. Like I'm sitting there at 10 p.m. trying to do fab in the wet lab because I was too angry. Like there's no way I can't get this right. Like this is way too dumb for me to not finish this tonight, right? I don't know if you know how wet lab or fab works, but basically for me, I'm handling these half-inch samples with a tweezer, and when you're angry, you tend to drop things very easily with these tweezers, and you end up being more and more frustrated. And I'm honestly, that still happens. But at one point I stopped. Where am I in the bucket? How full is my bucket? I was thinking to myself, why was I angry? Part of it is, of course, stubbornness that, I don't believe I can get this right. But also, I realized when I started grad school, I had certain aspirations in mind. I wanted to explore Boston. I wanted to go to museums. I wanted to see the theaters or look at different things. And I realized I was fucking sitting in lab until 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. every other day. There's no way I can go hang out with people. And recognizing these flashpoints for me personally meant that I was like, it's not worth it. Or me being frustrated is just going to prolong my research, and then it's a lose-lose. But I do want to bring up the point that, even with the panelists, maybe things still aren't working out, and that's fine. You're still on your journey.
Yeah, okay. I have like 3 things to say because you guys are all like perfect and say such amazing things. So one, I'm a severe introvert. I don't know if we have any introverts on the call, but I am an introvert. Like I literally, my social battery drains like an old iPhone 3. Like it's literally like, it takes me 10 minutes and I'm like, okay, it's time to go. But no, I think I got like that because 1, COVID really did like isolate me. But 2, I think I put myself in this bubble of like, I have tunnel vision. I have blinders on. I don't see anything else but my goals. Like Kayla has to get from point A to point B in this amount of time. I have to have this, that. And then once I realized, I think this semester I really just crashed. Once I realized what I was doing to my mental health and my expectations and standards on myself, and how I was like closing off, I was just going into my shell like a little turtle. And the biggest thing that you should nurture in your life are your relationships with friends, family, significant others, cousins, whoever it may be. You have to nurture those relationships, because I started to see like people I really, really genuinely cared about were like, Kayla, you haven't called me in like 3 days. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And I couldn't even like tell them why I didn't call them. I was just like, it got to the point where I was like laying in bed, doing nothing. Like I was just laying there thinking about how I could solve this code. Like, Kayla, do something else. Like do something else with your life. And when people started to come to me that I genuinely talked to every day, I genuinely had this, like, we checked in every day. When I started to notice my patterns were kind of getting off, I was like, that's not cute. We don't like that. And I had to readjust my expectations and look deeper and look within myself. So that's literally, yeah. So this semester, someone just said, Thomas, yeah, it has. I don't know what it is about the semester, Thomas. I genuinely don't, but it's been rough. And the last thing I was going to say is, you have to understand that your mind, your body, all my neuroscientists on here help me out. Your mind and your body are connected. So if you're not feeding your body correctly, Kayla, like eat a meal sometimes, then your brain's not going to work adequately. And that's where frustration, anger, annoyance, all of those things come into play. And as Teddy was saying, so it's like, the things that, and you go to sleep, go eat a meal, and you come back and you're like, I literally could have done this in like 10 minutes, but I was so dehydrated or so like I had no, like my blood sugar was low. Like I had nothing going, sustaining myself, that I couldn't even figure out something so simple. Yet at the time it was like, I was trying to like solve like a really hard equation that no one can solve. Like it wasn't like that. So this semester, again, guys, I don't know what's going on. Like I'm like counting down the days until the end of the semester. And I think this summer I'm gonna be really intentional about, I'm gonna go into grad apps with a very open mind. Like anything can happen. Life is gonna be life, and stop setting myself under these extremely high expectations that other people aren't putting on me. I'm putting that on myself. So understanding that your bucket, if it's low, you need to be like, hey, I have to leave lab. Even if it's just go get a cupcake or something, like leave and like fuel yourself how you need to be fueled, and come back in a way that you're like, okay, I'm not going to blow up on my lab mate today because I ate something, or I'm not going to like freak out on my PI because I drank some water. Like simple things like that is just all it takes. So yeah, again, this semester sucks. We're going to get through it, but yeah.
I guess one thing, I know we're running kind of short on time, but one thing that sparked in my mind after hearing your description, Teddy, about kind of like anger fueling you, I feel like two like related pieces of that would be, I think a lot of people commonly describe it as like a guilt of not living up to kind of past expectations. And I think maybe a joint like, or a connection between those two feelings is just this building up of kind of an ego, right? Of like, I am better than this. I am smarter. I need to work harder. Like other people think that I'm smarter, that I'm more competent. And that, I think, to be honest, something I still totally struggle with, but it can be super destructive. And so I guess kind of a way of like tying together some of the things we've talked about would be maybe to let your narrative kind of help guide your selection of opportunities to things that kind of will help you work smarter in a way that's like kind of focus on the things that actually really matter to you in terms of the skills you're developing or the experiences you're having or the people you're working with, but don't let it work against you in terms of like beating yourself down because things aren't going the way that you think they should be. And I think that's really hard for all of us, especially after like, say, winning something like Goldwater. It becomes a lot easier for it to start working against you. And so I guess my best advice would be try not to let it work against you.
Yeah, so Thomas, you had a very, very popular questions, it seems. But I guess the extension to this line of discussion is I want to talk about adaptability. Some of us sort of touched on this when we were discussing our experiences with COVID, but with these difficulties, how do we adapt? Whether that's wearing different hats, whether it's redefining yourself. I was just wondering if the panelists have any insights they wanted to share with how to build that muscle of being adaptable in an environment that may or may not be ideal.
Yeah, I think, so I'll just get a little background on my story real quick. So I actually didn't want to go to college out of high school. I wanted to go into the military. So I was like already listed in the Air Force, was like ready to like, do my thing. And I get to it's called MEPS, but it's basically where they like check you out physically to make sure that you're okay to join the military. And I can't see, thanks to my dad. So I'm literally like, they're like, so like you can't see. And I'm like, I know, but like it can be fixed, right? And they're like, no, sorry. And I couldn't join the military. And so that left me senior year just like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like I had no idea at that point. I didn't really apply to colleges at that point. I didn't really, wasn't really looking at like what I wanted to do. I just knew I loved space. And so in the military, I wanted to be a space systems operator. So hopefully I would have been like helping astronauts and stuff, but like I'm doing cooler stuff now too. It's fine. Everything works out. But no, I think that taught me, and my parents were very there, but they were also kind of hands off because they're like, you made this decision, Kayla. You knew you wanted to go to the military. We discussed options and you made your choice. And so when it came down to it, I think the biggest thing that I would say to any really incoming freshman into college, or like even from undergrad to grad school, or just going to like a new job or like a new lab or something, be sure that environment is where you want to be and where you want to go. Don't just be so quick with the gravity of opportunities, because you don't want to grab something that you're like, okay, it's really cool, but I'm very unhappy. But you also don't want to not grab enough opportunities to where it's like, I'm not grabbing anything and I'm just kind of like floating along. So I think adaptability is all about trying again. And it's like going to the gym. Like, you're not just going to like, build your muscle overnight. It's going to take consistency and time. And I think that goes back to pouring that encouragement, support, and guidance within yourself, but also seeking it elsewhere in people that you trust. And so again, like, you're going to be put in situations for life that make you uncomfortable, because I know we've all been in them. And I've been in a lot in the past couple of years. I didn't even know like what was going on. And there were some that I was like, okay, I genuinely don't know how to deal with this. I need help. But there were some where I'm like, okay, that person's just being mean, so I'm just going to walk away and not be a big baby about it, because I'm a big crybaby. So like, I take everything to heart. But I can't do that anymore. That's not how life goes. So I think knowing that you're going to fall again. It may not be today, may not be tomorrow, may not be next week, but you're going to fall. When that happens, are you going to get up? Or are you just going to like, just kind of sit in that pain and that hurt, even though you have the strength to get back up? And so I think understanding that strength and power and resilience within yourself is the first step, because if you don't see it within you, no one around you is going to see it within you. Everyone, like, we all want that validation. We all seek that, like, I want that person to say that about me. But if you don't see it in yourself, what if that person's not there one day? How are you gonna, bounce back up? And so life is gonna be life. That's my motto right now. And I don't really know how else to put it, because it's gonna be life. And it looks
That's a good motto.
Yeah, life is gonna be life. I don't really know how to.
C'est la vie.
Yeah.
So we are 3 minutes past the hour. I put it in the chat, but if you do have to run, the rest of the event will be recorded. And to our panelists, if you have to run, yes, you've already fulfilled your hours-long obligation. So please feel free to drop off. But if people are willing, we can just stay on and chat. And in regards of the next question, if people want to stay on, I think Kayla talked a lot about being your own advocate. And we've talked a lot today about failures or how we can adapt to these failures, but we haven't talked about how we can celebrate our own successes. How do we celebrate that, whether it's the part of us who does research or the human part of us? So if the panelists have any ideas of how they celebrate their own little victories, or how they wish they could help others celebrate, I think that would be a great thing to talk about.
I changed my environment. I have a Wanderlust tattooed right here. I like to move around a lot. So I will just go on a trip. And I do that to celebrate, and also when I'm feeling like really stressed out. It's just like, we're not doing work today. We're going to the beach, like, or to the mountains, or I keep hiking boots in my car at all times in case the mood strikes me. It's North Carolina. It's pretty and green. I don't know. So I move. Yeah, for me, I just move around and kind of enjoy like the fact that like I'm alive. Like, and then I reflect, which is a lot of what I do, like when I'm hiking. But just kind of reflect on where you were and where you are now. And I think that's also a really good idea to do when you feel really, really bad about yourself in some way. Like I put in the chat, like I took 3 times to pass analytical chemistry. While going through that, even though it's very humbling, there was also a part like in Oklahoma when I was in community college where I was homeless. So like, I have a home, so I'm like, I'll take it again. Like, things have been worse. Things have been worse. And Kayla's very right. Life is going to be life. 5 years ago, when I just randomly decided to start college, I had no idea that I would be sitting here in a really fancy university, living life, but life is gonna be life. And there are gonna be hard times, but you pat yourself on the back for getting through them, and you go get ice cream and you gear up for the next day. And then you give it your all. Every day is a new opportunity.
Quickly also tying this back to adaptability. So adaptability can be very personal, but it can also really depend on your mentors. And the reason why I bring this up is because we tend to place our failures on personal reasons and our successes on external reasons like luck. And mentors can be there to kind of bring us out of this bubble and say, no, your success is not only, they can go with luck, but also a lot of the time it can be because of your grit and your ability to persevere through obstacles. And you should recognize some of that, right? You should be able to pat yourself on the back and like, you went through this and you were able to get through. And the same way of your failures, sometimes they are personal, but other times they can be because of luck or because of being in the wrong place at a certain time, right? So having a mentor there to sort of bring you out of that bubble and recognize you for you can be very important in terms of adaptability and in terms of recognizing your successes.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think a lot of people may shy away from is when you celebrate yourself, that can come off as like conceited or overconfident or cocky. And I don't know if anyone else experienced it while winning the Goldwater, but it was sometimes where I was like at night and I would like read my application. And it wasn't because I was like, oh my God, I won, like I need to reread this, but it was like, you love research so much. It's such a deep passion for you that you were able to show that to other people through words. And I found that for myself extremely powerful. Like it wasn't just like I won and it was like great. It was like I just poured my all into the application and I wanted to celebrate that within myself. Like I was just so proud of like how far I had come and the person that I was kind of finding along the way. And so I think that got all lost in the shuffle because it was like other people were seeing it, but not in the way that I was seeing it myself. And so I almost started to like blind or like blend the views of like, okay, other people see it this way, I see it this way. And I kind of like favor other people as humans do. We favor other people's opinions of us. But it was like, no, like I would like reread what I wrote and I'm like, wow, like I knew I cared, but like I really cared. Like I really cared. And I think for me, like it was just such a like humbling experience because like my parents don't know what I'm writing about. They don't know what my research is about to this day. I've been doing it for 3 years. Like they don't know what I'm talking about. And they're like, oh my God, you won. And I'm like, yeah, but like, do you still know, what my research is about yet? They're like, no, but we know that's something to do with Mars, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. But no, it's like no one is as intertwined or connected with your work as you are. But at the same time, I'm just a person who does research. I'm not a like a researcher 24/7. If you see me on the weekends, Kayla's probably binging Grey's Anatomy over and over again, eating Sour Patch Kids. So it's just like I have different forms of Kayla, but it's also like I know what I want to put out into the world, and I want to put all of it's a lot of fun, Thomas. I want to put a lot of like different Kaylas into the world because everyone deserves to know every side of you because every side of you is beautiful. And so celebrating that, I mean, within itself, you were able to convey that to a panel of people that you've never met, probably have no idea what your research is about, but you were able to convey your passion through words. And I feel like that's what we're all doing here when we write papers. That's literally all we're doing is just conveying what we research, but like our passion behind that. And so I don't know, we're all going to change the world one day and it's going to be great. And it's going to be just an honor to know every one of you. And I think it's going to be really cool to know that like, no matter where you come from in life, that does not define your future whatsoever.
You make a really good point about kind of finding reinforcement in yourself, because for most of us here, we're very much inclined to be our own worst critic. And so something that I've noticed, even just being in my second year as a grad student, looking at, first year grad students and the things they tend to say about their research or their classwork, everybody can be so negative about themselves. Like, you'll look at someone present the most interesting work ever during a group meeting. They'll be like, well, this data could be improved for this reason. This data could be improved. Like, it's really not that great. It's like, excuse me, this is incredible. And so I think, helping other people find that for themselves, like when other people are struggling with that confidence boost, trying to give that for other people can be so helpful, because again, it's so easy to realize, like, to look at others and realize, wow, they're being way too self-critical, and kind of try to give them that boost, but we don't often so much do that for ourselves. And so you make such a good point about how you looked through your old application and you really took the time to appreciate what you did with that application, conveying your passion. Like, that's a really impressive thing to do. And so I think, it's so easy to sit there and look at where you are and think about where you could be, where you're hoping to get, the things you don't know. And sometimes it's really helpful to just take a second and reflect and think about, where are you coming in from? For example, 2 years ago, I did not know that my field of research existed. And so every once in a while, I'll make a silly mistake in research, or I'll find myself confused about something where it's like, oh, I should have known that, or I won't have the right intuition for something. And it's like, oh, I'm not doing my job as a grad student. Like, I need to know everything right now, and oh, I need to improve in this area. But my gosh, 2 years ago, I couldn't have told you what photonics was. And now, looking at kind of the scale up in learning and really thinking about, what we're all doing research, but at the same time, we're all very much in a learning stage still, thinking about where you're coming in from, giving yourself that credit, and also helping give that credit to others when you notice that they're being hard on themselves, can be really, really helpful for just kind of changing your mindset. And that doesn't mean it's easy to do all the time. Like, I still, constantly have moments where I'm like, oh, I should have known that, or oh, I should have known to do X, Y, Z differently. But now I know for the future. That's the whole point of learning. And so, again, kind of giving yourself some generosity and helping, boost other people's confidence can be really, really helpful. And just as kind of a last note, if you do find that you're struggling with your own confidence, and you do find that you have a mentor who you really trust and who you're comfortable with, it can be really helpful to just ask for a sit-down conversation and just talk about where you are, where you'd like to be. So I can guarantee the things you're worried about your favorite mentors thinking about you, they're not thinking. And so if you really are worried, and again, if you have someone that you're comfortable, really having a constructive conversation with, prepping some notes about, like, I'm concerned about this, I'd like to get better at this, and really, hashing out where you are and where you'd like to be, that can also be very helpful, because usually you'll find that, your mentor is not going to sit there and be like, oh yeah, I'm concerned about these things too. Usually you can have a really productive conversation and make a lot of progress in tandem with someone who you really trust. So kind of finding validation yourself, providing it to others, and reaching out to other people when you need it can all be really helpful for kind of keeping a positive mindset about yourself and keeping in mind that you're still growing.
I think it's funny that a few years ago, I was looking at the papers and presentations that I'm supposed to be putting out for my research. And I was like, before I started grad school, I think I recognized the articles in the title of my research project, and that's about it. I haven't even heard of the other words. Anyways, just a side tangent, but I also want to bring kind of a different side of the coin to what you said about finding confidence and building the confidence in yourself and others, which I think for me and a lot of Goldwater scholars, we're used to projecting strength. You're used to, being this shiny, quintessential researcher that is always very impressive and stuff. And while there is a small place for that in academia, when you're presenting, you want to sound like you know what you're talking about. I think that it might mask deeper issues where you're really just using this as an armor for your own insecurities, right? I was thinking about when I tend to do this and if that's actually what I want. And I realized while there's places for it, in most of my day-to-day, I don't want to be constantly projecting strength. In my research group, for example, I want the dynamic to be, if the heavens fall, I'll hold it up for you. Like this is the feeling I want to have between our group members, and not, oh, that guy is so impressive or she's so great with her research, I'm too afraid to go talk to her. So I think just want to normalize that it's okay that you have this instinct to project strength, but also think about what you actually want at the end of the day.
I loved hearing everyone else's strategies. A couple kind of smaller ones to throw in. One of my mentors once told me that she keeps a folder of like happy emails that she labels and just like saves for when she needs to like go be reminded of good things that have happened. And so I've adopted that strategy, and it actually is like kind of nice. It can be anything like good or small. Like I've included everything from like a, email about, oh, you've been accepted to some opportunity, down to like someone told me, oh, like you did a good job like teaching this like lab lecture, like, oh, thanks for giving me this piece of advice, like just small things. And that can be a really nice reminder of both the opportunities that you've had and also like things that other people have said, or anyways, when you need to just like have other people's perspectives, that is a nice tool. The other thing I guess I'll say is I think a lot of us can feel really uncomfortable with the kind of like projecting strength or advertising our successes. And so one thing that I found helpful is I don't need to celebrate it widely, but having like a couple people either, within my social network or maybe like a trusted mentor with whom I actually kind of trust to share my successes. That sounds like a weird thing, but like actually I think oftentimes in grad school, it can be easy to kind of share the vulnerabilities or the things that you're stressed about. And having some people that you trust to actually like hear good news on your part and feel happy for you as opposed to like jealous of you, having a couple of those people that and can feel that way mutually is so important. So just, thinking about like, who can I really trust to like hear about a success and just feel happy for me, and that I would have the same feeling.
Yeah, that mutualistic support is so important, because I think when you get into a world that's so small like academia is, and to my knowledge, very can be cutthroat at times, can be very selective at times, depending on where you are and your field and all those things. I think representation of who you are as a person is so important, because it can get drowned out so quickly out of everything that's going on. And so I think, again, like you said, Ellen, having those mutualistic friendships and mutualistic support systems, that it just goes both ways. That like, okay, I'm always looking out for them, they're always looking out for me, and I know that someone is always in my corner. Not that you need validation like you said, but even like people noticing the small things that you do, it's like, wow, okay, things you didn't even know within yourself. That's like, I don't know, that's the biggest compliment ever. And I think the best compliment I've gotten in my research career thus far is actually, so I was talking to a professor from Caltech who wasn't my PI, and he was like, oh, Kayla, I recognize your name. Your PI like talks about you all the time, how great you are. And keep in mind, I've met my PI all of 2 times ever in life, because I'm in Ohio, he's in California, and I've been doing research virtually for 3 years. So I've met him all of 2 times. But my work ethic and who I am and my perseverance to want to learn and my curiosity is just, I guess, shown through to him. And so he's now talking to colleagues about me. That's like, it's such a humbling experience, because you're like, okay, people that have been in this field for forever and know the ropes, know what it looks like to like someone who's actually trying and wants a career in this field. And I think that's the most it was so great. Another thing is, Teddy, what your PI said, okay, literally also made me tear up, because I think that's like, that is the most beautiful way to put that. I don't even know a better way to put that, because I think we always want to say, okay, I want it because of this, or because of that person, or because of that. But I had no idea what the Goldwater was until November. You know, it's due in January. So my mentor, she was like, hey, have you heard of the Goldwater? And I'm like, I have no idea what it is. Did a quick Google search. And I'm like, are you sure you want me to do this? Like, are we having the same conversation? She was like, yeah, you'd be great. And I think now looking back, she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, but it was like, I worked hard for that. And that didn't really click until like after the fact, I guess. And so, yeah, that just made me tear up, because everyone's been telling me that you don't really see it until you see it. I mean, it's a very individual path, an individual journey to get to that realization. But I'm curious, what did you say or back when he said that, or she said that, or they said that? Like, what did you?
I didn't have a response. I was like, oh, I mean, you're not wrong.
It's just, oh my God, that just made my heart so happy. It really did.
The you're not wrong, but I also would have never thought of that myself kind of thing.
Yeah. He's also full of this type of, I think they call aphorisms. But anyway, he's full of quotes.
That's awesome.
To the new, I got my shirt. To the new scholars, I'm going to tell you something. If you're deciding where to go for post college, one thing he told me, and I think you should know, is 6 years is too long. 6 years too long to work for an asshole. So pick your advisor correctly. Okay, we are quite past our planned time, but if anyone at this point has something they want to share or ask, I think we can talk through that and before we wrap up for tonight.
I guess I can ask a question or ask for feedback. So since like my freshman first semester, I've been working on like this independent project where I've had to like design the entire thing myself, like literature review, like research question, plan the entire thing, propose this project by myself. Like it's 100% independent. I don't really work with my PI a lot. So it's kind of like all on me. I have to do like international conferences this semester, break on the first author paper that I'm supposed to be working on. And it's just really stressful, like having all that pressure on you, especially like as a sophomore. And I like kind of find myself in like a paralysis at some times. So I was wondering if like any of you had like experience with that feeling.
I mean, I have paralysis about much easier and smaller things. Actually, I was supposed to read like 4 papers yesterday just to discuss my research direction with one of my PIs, and I just lied in my bed until 2 a.m. Before I even started reading those papers. So I definitely know what you mean by paralysis. I think it happens a lot. It may happen to you very often throughout your journey, and it sucks. We've talked a lot about different coping mechanisms that you can try to do today, so I'm not going to rehash the same things, but I think at some point I'm coming around the bend now. It's just, you just kind of have to start. And for me, when I actually started reading the paper that I've been dreading for like 2 weeks, I was like, wow, these are really interesting. The stuff in this paper are like really cool. And so I don't have a magic pill for you, but for me, when I started doing it, I actually find more enjoyment than I have like forecasted for myself. Oh, and bye, Ellen. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so to answer Vesper's question really quick, how do you clearly articulate your value to academic entities? And do you have any general process tips for setting up a good proposal? I'm still like really learning this. Does any grad school students want to tackle that one that Vesper asked? I think all the proposals that I wrote or have written, basically, I'm a huge overwriter, like oversharer. So I want to include everything. But like, I don't know the best way to answer that in a concise way. But I think my best bet or my best guess, and everyone correct me if I'm wrong, but my best guess would be to pick out the key things in your research that you think are worth noting in a just at a glance. Like if someone just glance over it, what are the key points that you think will be very beneficial? And then I think just kind of fill in the gaps with like putting each piece of your research you picked out, just kind of see how they fit together, because everything is just should be intertwined with each other overall. So yeah, that's my best guess.
Yeah, I can kind of tackle both questions really quickly. Since Amber, I kind of related to your question about kind of feeling paralysis, especially as a younger undergrad. It can be so overwhelming to work on a project alone. And so I wanted to quickly share one of the scariest points in my entire academic career was right after COVID started. I want to make sure I'm answering the right person. Amber, there's a question in the chat and a question that was asked. Okay, perfect. I wanted to make sure I'm addressing the right person for now. So Amber, in answer to your question about kind of, again, experiencing paralysis, especially when you're working on something independently, I think one of the scariest points in my entire research career so far was right after COVID started. My advisor and I decided to pivot from the research we were doing because it was hardware, so we couldn't work on it anymore. And my advisor was wondering if we could switch some of our previous machine learning expertise into research on COVID. And so we completely pivoted and just kind of started toying around at first, seeing like, okay, we have knowledge of physics. We have a lot of time on our hands. We have knowledge of machine learning. Can we get a model that actually predicts COVID spread? And we found that we could do a decent job, and the project kind of started picking up steam. And at some point, my advisor found that there was a repository where weekly you could submit predictions for COVID spread using like any type of modeling. And so the type of modeling we were doing actually fit in really nicely with the kind of scope of the repository. And so my advisor found this and he was like, do you think we could start submitting to this? And I mean, I was excited about the idea, but I was like, yeah, yes, I guess. And like in a panic, started looking into like, oh my gosh, we have to start doing like bounds on our data. We have to start running stats. We have to start doing all of this stuff. And it got super duper overwhelming. And so me and my advisor ended up kind of teaming up and making it happen. But along the way, we learned a lot about, for example, we ended up bringing other undergrads onto the project so that it wasn't just me anymore once it started getting overwhelming. And we actually built a little team, and we would have like weekly subgroup meetings where we would talk about the project. And so it stopped feeling like I was so isolated. And I kind of like, we had a support system, and we had kind of like a designated set of people who like, we subdivided tasks. Like, okay, this person handles this type of, processing. This person handles like this kind of code structuring. So that actually helped a lot. It was kind of bringing in other people. And also I would say that like, you're so early on in your journey, you're super young as an undergrad. Now, like you mentioned, you're just a sophomore. And so if this can be a learning experience for you for what you want in the future. For example, I learned from working on smaller teams and working on like huge collaborations with dozens of people that I like something in the middle. I don't like working on my own, but I also kind of don't like getting swallowed up in a sea of like dozens of people on the same project. So you can very much use this as a learning experience, either continuing with this project, maybe talking to your advisor about bringing in other people, or, you know, maybe switching gears, looking into a different project, joining another effort, or even eventually switching to kind of a different research area or a different group structure that like works a little better for you. But you can very much take this as a learning experience, and hopefully, you know, it sounds definitely like you have a lot going on with kind of getting through all of these immediate tasks you have ahead of you with writing a paper and all of that. So I would say for now, rely on your advisor as much as you possibly can. Try to get feedback where you can, ask to bring in other people, and also think about this as a learning lesson for the future. Yeah.
Now that I had more time and inspiration to think about your question, Amber, I have to agree with Sabrina on many counts, but on a practical level, what I would do is two things. One, start looking at what you have agency about, like what do you have the freedom and flexibility to do? And then two, try to right size how big or daunting the experience should be for you. So what I mean by that, first, advisor is very good to bring in, but I think for undergrad, the fastest way might be for you to look for a graduate mentor, right? Someone who has done this maybe once or twice before and has the time in a day and to give you the attention and hands-on help that you need. When I was writing grants, what I found useful, I literally just asked my PI, can I see an old grant that you've written on something similar? And then he said, yes, absolutely. The way to become a better writer is to look at someone who's a good writer and then emulate their style until you develop your own. So that's what I mean by the first one. On the second one, and on the right sizing, Sabrina brought this up as well, but how catastrophic would it be for you if you don't do like 120%, if you don't wow everyone, right? I think it's important to try to decatastrophize some of the difficulties that we go through in life. And again, you're a sophomore. This is a learning experience for you. If you show up and you're not the best paper of a conference, or you're not the best application the grant agency has ever seen, yeah, that's how it's supposed to be, right? It's okay. It doesn't reflect badly on you. In fact, the fact that you're doing it reflects very well on you. So think about, those two things: right sizing, decatastrophizing, and how to bring in help. Okay. Any other questions before we close for the night?
I had a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
So once, just to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Andreas. I study something called the bulk photovoltaic effect, which is a nonlinear optical effect. And I do research in the chemistry department at the University of Pennsylvania. So my work is computational chemistry. And my question was going to be, how do you develop patience with yourself throughout the research process? Because I feel like a lot of scientific research is really results oriented. There's that phrase, publish or perish, and people are always asking, like, where's your results? Do you have results for this? And sometimes I'm so close, and then there's like one or two things. And even if I try and take a break and do another hobby or focus on something else, like you have suggested, which is a great suggestion, I'm like, oh, if only I could do that one thing. Like, I really need to do that thing now. Like, how do I reframe my mindset? So I'm like, it's okay that I'm not there yet. The results will come someday. Do you have any suggestions for that?
I love this question. Andreas, nice to meet you. If you really think about it, does research ever hit a dead end? No, it doesn't. Like, it literally does not. It's an open-ended field. And so I think when you keep that in mind, it's like, okay, I think me studying planets, like we've never been to Mars. Like, it's all just like perseverance. If Percy feels like bringing stuff back to Earth today, Percy feels like bringing stuff back from Earth today, but I can't really control that. A lot of it's out of our control. And I think planetary science has really taught me that a lot of it is it's very up to you and how you want to deal with data. And so I think this entire question is based around how do you define yourself as a researcher, I guess? And again, those standards that you're putting and expectations that you're putting on yourself. Because if you're trying to meet a deadline, that's one thing, but also quality over quantity. Am I right? Like, I think that's the golden rule. And that's, one of the golden rules. And I think that since research is so open-ended in that the sense of when you think you're finished or you think your work is publishable, someone will be like, well, you could also do this. And I can be like, oh, well, yeah, I can probably make a whole nother project off of that one tiny thing that you changed. And so keeping that in mind, I think just kind of brings you back down to earth. And you're kind of like, okay, I don't have to be something so like make breakthroughs and all these things every year and publish a earth-shattering paper every year, because it's not feasible. It's literally not like humane to yourself to treat yourself that way. Like it's too much. And so I think my personal advice, I just, one of my co-author papers just got accepted today. So it's really exciting. And I'm like freaking out. And I think my first paper, like the whole experience I went through, and I'm like, I could not do this every 3 months. Like, this is insane. Like it was the whole process of like it getting rejected at some journals, getting accepted in another journal. It's just, the whole thing was just so up in the air. And so when you put the reality checks on, results and the reality checks on what you're actually going to be publishing, it's like, okay, as a human, how much can I feasibly do in a reasonable amount of time without stressing myself out beyond belief? Because at some point you need to just understand that you're going to have time. You have your entire career to get there. And so I know this may be different at the graduate level. I know grad students can speak to this. That's what I'm kind of scared about too. But at undergrad level, at least, I think I've just been taught to pace myself, and I'm really I want to spend more time learning the information rather than just like spitting things out, because I don't know everything. I'm still trying to learn everything. And so when my PI is like, hey, can you do this? And I'm like, okay, now I got to sit here for 6 hours and try to figure out how to plot a line on Python. So we're going to start from square one. Exactly. Yeah. And once I did that, I was like, okay, let's do this again. And I was so proud of myself. But those little milestones for yourself, take those into consideration, how they made you feel, because we're going to all get more awards, more accolades, more recognition. But knowing that research is ever ending, there's going to be thousands and thousands of questions that if you're not first authoring on them, you're at least going to be contributing to them in some way, shape, or form. And that comes with people citing your work, people asking to use your models, people asking to use your equipment, all those things. People are going to know who you are. And I think that's a really big thing in academia, is to be known, I guess. I don't know if that's true, but I guess being known in the sense that you want all your papers to be cited. You want, you want you want to be recognized in all these different ways. And I just know that research is never ending. And that's the beauty in it. That's why I want to go into it, because it's like, I'm never going to get bored. I learned something on Friday when I was presenting my research. I'm like, I could literally build my own planet and like put whatever I want in the atmosphere, and I promise you it would exist somewhere. Like, I just think that's so beautiful. And so I think, again, like, knowing that research is bottomless, like there's no limits to it, I think that kind of grounds you and know that, like, okay, this paper, these results will come, but I'm probably going to come up with like 10 different questions in the process. That's the beauty in it, so in my opinion.
So Kayla, actually, there's two things I want to say. One in response to Kayla, and one in response to Andrea's original question. So first, I want to share a little bit about, I guess, my outlook or my scientific philosophy. I think, Kayla, you hit it dead on that in academia, it's publish or perish, and a lot of people are very concerned about prestige. But honestly, when I was going to grad school, and even now, I'm asking myself, why do I want to do research? For me personally, right? Am I here to have has my name show up as many times as possible in science, or I'm here to do good work? And there's a part of me that's like, I am not going to let my life be defined by how many sites, what my H index is going to be. right? What is the metric in which you're going to measure your own success was something that I think over and over again when I'm doing research. And to me, it's more about learning, as Kayla bring up, like, I want to learn, I want to actually become a better researcher. I want to actually learn deeply about these very beautiful things. And also, I want to kind of leave a contribution that's not just an H index, right? If I write one paper that has 3 citations, but that one citation actually ends up, you know, helping someone form their thesis, like helping them feel great about their research or develop their thing, I think that's more important. But that's my personal feeling. So I understand people have other outlooks. The second thing, to address what Andreas was talking about, for me, one thing that worked for me, I don't think it works for everyone, is when I look at daunting tasks, the engineering part of me, I guess, try to compartmentalize or modularize the issues. And my coping mechanism in a way is, how do I rationalize this? So for me, when I was in the lab dropping samples because I was angry and frustrated and staying up way too late to do something, I started asking myself, is this actually efficient? Am I being productive? Right? I'm deluding myself into thinking, oh, if I just stay 2 hours longer, I can get 2 hours of work done. And I end up creating samples that are not just useless, it wasted my time because I'm like characterizing them and trying to analyze the data, right? So patience to me was sort of forced upon me when I started to look at it from a term of efficiency. And that's something that worked for me, starting to work for me. I'm still not there yet, but I think for you, you can maybe think about, again, what is the metric, right? Why are you doing, what do you need to be patient for, right? Or what are you weighting yourself on? What are you working towards? Is it for these near-term results or for these small advancements that probably just washes out at the end? Or is it for a final goal? Is it for learning how to plot a line in Python because you're going to plot a line in grad school? Or is it to just crafting that, maybe not crafting the paragraph in the paper, but having the coherent and clear lines of thought to articulate a difficult concept in a clear way, right? Like that would be more important to me than, being very rushed and trying to write out, just like crap out as many papers as possible. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of you. I think it's really nice to get a couple different perspectives, so I'm not just all in my head. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you all for staying extra late with us tonight. But again, I think Leah made a chat in the Slack just for this type of topic. So feel free to use the Slack or DM any of us. But other than that, if no one else wants to jump in, I hope you all have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks.
See ya.
Night.
Night.